She was
You need
unnoticed
to
girl in
mind your own
14C
business
until
and
the
shut
plane
up
started
right
crashing and
now.
she saved everyone. She had always preferred to observe
I
rather than
demand to speak to the
participate,
pilot.
to watch
This is
quietly while
absolutely
others
unacceptable
laughed,
service, and
talked,
you
or
cannot
argued.
treat passengers this
Traveling
way.
alone had
I
become
know
a
my
habit for her,
rights.
a small comfort in a world where she often felt unnoticed. At 23, she had learned that the less attention she drew, the smoother her life seemed to flow. It wasn't that she was shy in the usual sense. She simply valued calm and reflection over noise and chaos. Today, as she gripped the armrests of her seat and adjusted the strap of her backpack, she felt the familiar mix of excitement and apprehension that always accompanied air travel. The cabin around her buzzed with the usual pre-flight energy. Passengers chatted, flight attendants moved briskly down the aisles checking tickets and explaining safety procedures, and the occasional baby's cry pierced the air. Yet, despite the noise, Amara remained almost invisible. She watched the interactions around her with quiet curiosity, noticing small details that most people overlooked. The way a man adjusted his tie nervously, how a young mother fumbled with her baby's bottle, or how a couple argued quietly over seat selection. To Amara, every movement, every expression told a story. It was a skill she had developed over years of quietly observing the world. As the plane taxied down the runway, Amara's thoughts drifted to her own story. She had grown up in a small town where everyone seemed to know everyone else's life story, except hers. She was the girl who did her homework on time, who said thank you when needed, who rarely caused trouble and rarely attracted attention. Friends were few, but her few friendships were deep and meaningful. She had learned early on that people rarely noticed the quiet ones until they were needed. It had been a lesson she had carried with her into adulthood, one that both comforted and frustrated her. Being unnoticed had its advantages, like the ability to think and act without distraction, but it also carried the weight of being overlooked, even when she had something important to offer. The plane began its ascent, and Amara felt the familiar pressure in her ears as it climbed higher into the sky. Around her, passengers fumbled with their seat belts, adjusted overhead compartments, or stared at the in-flight entertainment screens. She herself had little interest in movies or music. Instead, she observed the flight attendants, noting how they moved with practiced efficiency, how their eyes scanned the cabin, and how they managed both the nervous and the indifferent passengers. Even though she was only one person among hundreds, she felt a strange sense of connection to them. She understood their roles and their responsibilities, and she admired the calm authority they exuded. As the plane leveled off, Amara pulled a small notebook from her backpack. It wasn't unusual for her to carry one, filled with notes, sketches, and observations about the world. She began to write, her pen moving carefully across the page. She wrote about the people she saw, the small interactions, the way a child clutched a stuffed animal tightly, or how an elderly couple held hands during the turbulence. Writing helped her organize her thoughts, gave her a sense of control over a world that often seemed too chaotic. Around her, the cabin continued its hum of conversation and movement, but Amara remained focused, invisible to most, yet acutely aware of everything. A flight attendant passed by, offering drinks. Amara politely declined, and the attendant barely glanced at her before moving on. No one noticed her presence, and that was perfectly fine. She preferred it that way. It allowed her to think, to watch, and to prepare for whatever lay ahead. Her mind wandered to the purpose of her journey. She was traveling for work, yes, but also for personal reasons. She had been invited to a small conference in another city, one that promised to challenge her ideas and expand her horizons. Despite her usual quiet demeanor, she felt a flicker of excitement. She knew that this trip could be significant, a turning point if she allowed herself to fully engage. As the hours passed, Amara continued to observe the cabin. She noticed subtle signs that others overlooked. A seatbelt that was not properly fastened, a bag loosely stored overhead, a child's blanket hanging precariously close to the aisle. She cataloged these details quietly in her mind, not out of fear or anxiety, but out of a natural habit of awareness. It was a skill she had developed over time, a way of staying prepared for unexpected situations. Most people dismissed these observations as trivial, but Amara knew that small details often made a big difference. The flight moved smoothly at first, with the gentle hum of engines and the occasional announcement from the cockpit. Passengers settled into their routines, some reading, some sleeping, some talking quietly with their companions. Amara, true to her nature, remained observant yet quiet, watching the subtle patterns of human behavior unfold around her. She noticed a young man pacing nervously, glancing repeatedly at his watch. She saw an elderly woman struggling to reach the overhead bin and quickly offered her a hand. The woman smiled, thanking her, but returned to her seat almost immediately, leaving Amara to continue her quiet vigilance. She didn't mind. These small acts of kindness were not meant for recognition. Suddenly, a minor jolt shook the plane, barely enough to draw attention, but enough to make Amara's heart skip a beat. She glanced around and noticed the nervous reactions of those nearby. Some clutched their armrests, others exchanged worried glances. The flight attendants moved quickly down the aisles, offering reassurance and guidance. Amara's calm presence contrasted sharply with the growing anxiety around her. She remained seated but alert, noting every sound, every movement, every change in the environment. Her mind worked quickly, assessing possibilities and preparing for any situation that might arise. Hours passed, and the plane continued its journey without further incident. Yet, despite the apparent calm, Amara's mind never rested. She continued to observe, to catalog, to prepare. Her awareness was like a quiet shield, protecting not just herself, but also those who were oblivious to potential risks. She noticed a small oil stain near one of the engines, a loose latch on a door, and a seat that had not been properly secured. To most, these were trivial details, easily ignored. To Amara, they were reminders that vigilance was always necessary, even when the world seemed calm. As the plane approached its destination, Amara felt a mix of anticipation and unease. She was still unnoticed by most passengers, still just another face in the crowd, yet she knew that her awareness and preparation would matter if anything went wrong. She reflected on her life, on the countless times she had been overlooked, and on the quiet strength she had developed as a result. Being unnoticed had taught her patience, observation, and resilience. It had taught her that even the quietest voice could matter in moments that required courage and clarity. The descent began, and Amara adjusted her seat, fastening her seatbelt securely. She observed the cabin, noting that some passengers had not followed safety instructions correctly. She gently reminded a young couple to buckle up properly, and they nodded, smiling sheepishly. The flight attendants moved through the aisles, checking that everyone was prepared for landing. Amara's eyes scanned the cabin one last time, taking in the details that most would overlook. She felt a quiet sense of readiness, a sense that she was prepared for whatever might happen next. She did not yet know that the skills she had honed through years of quiet observation would soon be put to the ultimate test. As the plane neared the runway, the passengers around her were unaware of the challenges that lay ahead. They were focused on their own thoughts, conversations, or sleep, oblivious to the importance of calm, awareness, and quick thinking. Amara, in her quiet, unnoticed way, had already begun to prepare herself mentally for any situation. She understood that being ready did not always mean being recognized. Sometimes, it meant quietly standing tall, observing, and acting when the moment demanded. She took a deep breath, feeling the familiar mix of nervousness and focus. She was still the unnoticed girl in 14C, but she was ready to face whatever the skies might bring. The plane was cruising steadily when a sudden, sharp vibration ran through its body. Amara felt it first as a subtle shift beneath her, something so small most passengers ignored it. But her instincts, honed through years of observation, made her sit upright instantly. Her eyes scanned the cabin. Some people glanced around nervously, while others whispered questions to their companions. A young boy clutched his mother's arm, and an elderly man muttered under his breath, adjusting his glasses as if that could somehow make sense of the sudden movement. Moments later, the hum of the engines changed. A higher-pitched whine, unusual and worrying, filled the cabin. Amara felt a shiver run down her spine. Something was wrong. Flight attendants moved quickly down the aisles, offering calm reassurances, though their expressions betrayed tension. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, steady but serious, informing everyone of a minor mechanical issue. Most passengers relaxed, thinking the situation under control. But Amara's gaze stayed alert, scanning the cabin and noting every detail. The oxygen masks that had not deployed fully, the bags that had not been stowed correctly, and a loose panel near one of the exits. A sudden jolt shook the plane again, stronger this time. Panic began to ripple through the cabin. People screamed, grabbed at armrests, and shouted to loved ones. Flight attendants moved with practiced urgency, but the fear in some passengers' eyes made it clear that chaos was spreading faster than order. Amara remained seated, but her mind raced. She knew that panic was the real danger. Injuries often came from fear, not the mechanical problem itself. Her heart beat steadily, and she took a deep breath, focusing on what she could control. Beside her, a middle-aged man clutched the armrests and muttered repeatedly, "We're going to crash, we're going to crash." Amara gently placed a hand on his arm. "Listen to me," she said softly, keeping her voice calm. "Stay seated, keep your seatbelt tight, and follow instructions. It will help." He looked at her, startled that a quiet passenger had spoken, but her calmness seemed to reach him. He nodded, a small relief flickering across his face. Amara realized that her quiet presence could be more powerful than yelling or panicking. Sometimes, people only needed someone steady to anchor them. The plane jolted again, this time violently. Overhead compartments opened, and bags tumbled to the floor, narrowly missing passengers. A scream echoed as a child's toy fell inches from a woman's foot. Amara quickly leaned forward, grabbing the falling toy and handing it to the child. It's okay," she whispered, her voice steady. Around her, other passengers began to look for guidance, glancing at the flight attendants. But in this moment, the crew had too many emergencies to manage, and fear was spreading faster than instructions could. Amara's eyes moved to the oxygen masks. Some had dropped properly, while others were stuck in their compartments. She reached up and pulled the stuck masks free, handing them to passengers who struggled to secure them. A young mother tried to help her baby with the mask but panicked when it wouldn't fit properly. Amara knelt beside her. "Here, let me help," she said, guiding the mother's hands. "Keep your voice calm." Babies can feel fear. Slowly, the child stopped crying, comforted by the calm presence of someone who knew what to do. The turbulence worsened. Passengers screamed and clutched each other. Some people pushed past others in fear, while flight attendants struggled to keep everyone seated. Amara noticed a man near the aisle who had fainted from panic. She carefully leaned over and shook his shoulder gently. "Stay with me," she urged. "I'll help you." Slowly, he opened his eyes and gripped her hand. She guided him back into a safe position, ensuring he was secure and would not be injured when the next jolt hit. Around her, people began to notice her actions, though none had spoken to her before this crisis. A sudden announcement from the captain shook the cabin further. "We are experiencing severe engine problems. Brace for possible emergency landing," he said. Panic erupted like a wave. Passengers screamed louder, some crying, others trying to move to what they thought were safer seats. The flight attendants moved swiftly, shouting instructions, but fear made the words almost impossible to follow. Amara's voice cut through the noise as she stood slightly, keeping her tone firm but calm. "Everyone, listen to me. Stay in your seats. Fasten your seatbelts. Listen to the flight attendants." Her voice, steady and commanding, reached those closest to her. People began to respond, at least enough to reduce some chaos. Amara quickly assessed the cabin. The emergency exits were partially blocked. A bag had slid in front of one, and a tray table was stuck under another. She moved calmly, lifting the obstructions, instructing passengers nearby to help her. "Push this bag aside. Move the tray table. We need this exit clear," she said. Her hands worked efficiently, her calm demeanor giving others the courage to act. For the first time on this flight, people who had overlooked her were following her lead. The plane jolted again, dangerously, and the lights flickered. Some passengers screamed, pressing against each other in fear. Amara knelt beside a frightened teenager who had hidden under the seat in front of him. "It's okay," she whispered. "Look at me, take a deep breath. You are safe if you stay calm." Slowly, the boy lifted his head, breathing in deep, controlled breaths. Amara helped him secure his seatbelt and reassured him that he was not alone. Around her, more passengers began looking for guidance, drawn to the calm force she had become in the midst of panic. Suddenly, a small fire ignited near one of the back exits. Smoke began to rise and passengers screamed louder. Amara didn't hesitate. She ran to the area, keeping low to avoid the smoke, and guided passengers away from the flames. "This way, follow me," she shouted firmly. People followed her without question, instinctively trusting her steady tone. The flight attendants were already managing other emergencies. and Amara's decisive action prevented injuries from spreading panic near the fire. Amara's mind raced as she moved through the cabin, checking every passenger she could reach. She noticed a woman with a leg injury struggling to move. Without hesitation, she helped her into a safer seat. She guided a small child to hold their parent's hand, keeping them calm and secure. Every action was deliberate, measured, and focused on keeping everyone alive and as calm as possible. Around her, the cabin began to change. The chaos was still present, but there was now order in pockets, pockets created by her quiet but firm leadership. The plane continued its descent. Outside the windows, clouds swirled and the horizon tilted unnaturally. Amara's hands moved quickly, checking seatbelts, guiding frightened passengers, and ensuring that nothing would cause additional injuries. People who had ignored her earlier now recognized her presence. Some whispered to each other, pointing to the girl who had quietly taken control, saving them from panic. None of it mattered to her personally. She was focused only on keeping everyone alive. A mother clutched her child tightly, looking at Amara with tear-filled eyes. "Thank you," she said, voice trembling. Amara smiled softly. "Just stay calm, we'll get through this together." The words were simple, but they carried reassurance, a sense of steady confidence that helped everyone around her to focus. Amara understood that fear could spread faster than fire, but calm could spread just as quickly if someone took the first step. As the minutes dragged on, the turbulence worsened, and the plane's descent became steeper. Amara noticed that a few passengers were still in shock, unable to move or respond. She knelt beside them, speaking softly and guiding them to follow instructions. Her quiet leadership now extended to everyone within her reach. People began to help each other, inspired by her calm example. The panic was still there, but it was no longer uncontrolled. Then came a particularly harsh jolt that threw some passengers forward despite their seatbelts. Amara reacted instantly, bracing herself against a seat and helping those near her to stay secure. She noticed a man struggling to keep his tray table in place. "Hold it down, keep it secure," she shouted, guiding his hands. Others nearby began to imitate her actions, securing loose items and assisting each other. Slowly, the cabin became a network of people acting together, all inspired by the quiet girl in 14C minutes stretched like hours. Amara continued her steady vigilance, moving through the cabin, offering guidance, and maintaining a calm voice amidst the chaos. Flight attendants had regained some control, but it was clear that Amara's actions had prevented further panic and possible injuries. People who had earlier overlooked her now looked to her for reassurance. It was remarkable to see how quickly a quiet, unnoticed person could become the center of attention when courage and clarity were needed most. Even with the emergency alarms and the constant jolts, Amara maintained her focus. She moved to help a father struggling to comfort his crying child. "Hold them close, but breathe yourself. Stay calm," she instructed gently. The father nodded, following her instructions, and the child gradually stopped crying. Every small act mattered, and Amara made sure none of them were ignored. As the plane continued its difficult descent, the passengers began to understand that survival depended on calm, order, and quick action. Amara's quiet presence became the anchor everyone clung to. The unnoticed girl in 14C, who had quietly watched and observed for so many years, had become the guiding force in a moment of fear and uncertainty. No one could have predicted that the calm observer in the corner would emerge as the hero in this moment of crisis, but that was exactly what was happening. Her mind worked quickly, anticipating the next possible dangers. Loose items, blocked exits, panicking passengers, all were addressed systematically. She moved calmly from row to row, offering guidance and reassurance. By the time the plane neared the lower altitudes, a strange thing had happened. The chaos was still present, but it was no longer overwhelming. People were listening, following instructions, helping one another, and surviving. And through it all, Amara remained quietly, calmly at the center, doing everything she could to save lives without seeking recognition or praise. The plane's descent had become sharper and more turbulent, shaking violently with each passing second. Amara gripped her seat firmly, her knuckles white, but her mind remained clear and focused. Around her, panic was rising again, even after the earlier moments of order. Some passengers had frozen in fear, unable to act, while others were frantically moving, trying to secure their belongings. Amara's eyes scanned the cabin rapidly, noting every detail. She knew that the moments ahead would demand courage, decisiveness, and calm thinking. The captain's voice came over the intercom, slightly strained but still steady. "We are preparing for an emergency landing. Please remain calm, keep your seatbelts fastened, and follow all instructions." The words were meant to reassure, but to most passengers, they only confirmed the fear they had been trying to suppress. Amara, however, heard them differently. She understood that these were instructions to guide their actions. Panic could still be controlled if people listened, and she was determined to help them do just that. The turbulence intensified, and a loud alarm rang throughout the cabin. Some passengers screamed instinctively, throwing their hands in the air. Others clutched their children, whispering comforting words they barely believed themselves. Amara, despite the fear she naturally felt, remained a steady presence. She leaned slightly forward, her voice rising just enough to be heard over the noise. "Listen to me. Stay seated, tighten your seatbelts, and focus on your breathing. Everyone will get through this if you stay calm." Her words, firm but reassuring, cut through the chaos like a beacon. A passenger in the row ahead of her had panicked completely. He was trying to open the overhead compartment mid-flight, desperate to secure his belongings. Amara moved quickly, placing her hand on the compartment and pressing it shut. "You are not safe doing that. Sit down and fasten your seatbelt. I'll help with your bag after landing," she said firmly. The man froze for a moment, then complied, realizing that her calmness carried authority he could trust. Amara knew that small actions like this could prevent injuries during the critical moments of landing. Suddenly, a jolt threw a few passengers against their seatbacks. Amara immediately moved to help those affected. A woman nearby had hit her head lightly on the overhead bin. Amara leaned over, checking her for injuries. "Are you okay? Keep calm and breathe slowly. We are getting through this together," she said softly. The woman nodded, tears streaming down her face but visibly calmer. Around her, other passengers began to follow her example, taking deep breaths, holding onto their seatbelts, and focusing on her calm demeanor. Amara's attention shifted to the exits. Some were partially blocked by bags that had slid during turbulence, and others had tray tables or items that could fall during landing. She moved swiftly, clearing the obstacles. "This way, please. Move aside and help each other," she instructed. A few passengers hesitated at first, unsure what to do, but seeing her determination and control, they joined in, lifting bags and moving objects out of the way. Her actions were practical and quick, but they also carried reassurance. People began to trust her guidance without question. A small child nearby had begun crying again, frightened by the turbulence. Amara knelt beside him and gently held his hands. "Look at me," she said softly. "Take a deep breath. You are safe. Mommy and Daddy are right here, and we are going to be okay." Slowly, the boy's cries turned into hiccups, and eventually he calmed enough to sit quietly. The mother, relieved, looked at Amara with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. Amara smiled gently, knowing there was no time for praise now. Survival was the priority. The plane tilted sharply as it approached the lower altitude. Oxygen masks dangled, some still not properly secured, and smoke from minor electrical sparks had started to rise near the back of the plane. Amara noticed a young man struggling to fit his mask. "Here, let me help you. Pull it over your nose and mouth like this," she instructed, demonstrating calmly. Others nearby followed her example. Her actions, though quiet, ensured that everyone around her could breathe safely. She had become the anchor for passengers who would otherwise have panicked or made mistakes in fear. Suddenly, another jolt caused several passengers to lurch forward. A woman near the aisle had dropped her child, who slid dangerously close to the gap between seats. Without hesitation, Amara lunged forward, catching the child and securing him safely on the mother's lap. "Hold on tight," she said gently. The mother clutched her child and nodded, tears streaming but reassured by Amara's presence. Small acts like these multiplied in importance with each passing second, saving lives and preventing injuries that could have been much worse during the violent landing. Amara moved quickly to check on passengers who appeared frozen in fear. A man had buried his head under the seat in front of him, trembling. Amara knelt beside him and touched his shoulder lightly. "You are going to be okay? Look at me. Breathe in slowly and breathe out slowly. Focus on my voice. We will get through this together." The man looked up, seeing her steady eyes and calm expression, and gradually followed her guidance. Her presence alone reassured him enough to regain control over his fear. The back of the plane had become more dangerous as smoke spread from a minor fire near an electrical panel. Passengers in that area were panicking, some trying to move toward the front. Amara ran to them, staying low to avoid the smoke. "Stay calm, keep your heads down." "Follow me," she shouted. People instinctively obeyed, moving with her to safer positions. A father with two small children struggled to guide them, but Amara took the lead, holding the children's hands and guiding the family away from the danger. Her quick decisions prevented potential injuries and kept panic from spreading further. As the plane descended further, the turbulence worsened. Overhead bins opened, and loose items fell to the floor, threatening anyone in their path. Amara quickly moved to secure the area. "Hold this bag, make sure your tray tables are up, keep your belts tight," she instructed passengers nearby. People responded immediately, understanding that following her directions could mean the difference between safety and injury. The once unnoticed girl in 14C had become the center of attention, not because she demanded it, but because people instinctively trusted her calm authority. Amara noticed a man trying to stand in the aisle, panicked and shouting, "Sit down! Fasten your seatbelt!" "You are safer in your seat than anywhere else," she shouted. Her voice, strong and firm, commanded attention. The man froze, then sank back into his seat, securing his belt just as the plane jolted violently again. Around her, passengers began following her instructions more carefully, aware that she knew what to do. It was remarkable how quickly her calm, decisive actions had influenced everyone around her. A sudden lurch sent a few passengers' belongings tumbling again. Amara moved quickly, picking up a heavy bag and passing it to someone stronger nearby. "Hold this, secure it tightly," she instructed. Each action, though small in isolation, contributed to overall safety. She moved from row to row, checking seatbelts, helping those who had fallen against their seats and guiding passengers away from hazards. The chaos of the descent was still present, but her calm, organized presence had turned it into manageable order. Amara paused briefly to take a deep breath, feeling the strain in her arms and legs, but never letting fear touch her voice or actions. She glanced around, seeing passengers responding to her guidance, reassuring each other and moving safely. She realized that her ability to remain calm and focused was contagious. People were no longer panicking uncontrollably. They were acting rationally because she had shown them how. Her long years of being unnoticed had prepared her perfectly for this moment. The plane tilted dangerously again, and another strong jolt rocked it. Amara reacted immediately, steadying herself and helping those near her to brace for impact. A young woman had fainted from fear, and Amara lifted her carefully, guiding her back into her seat and making sure her seatbelt was secure. "You're going to be okay," she whispered, holding the woman's hand until she regained consciousness. Around her, passengers now looked to her for guidance. No one questioned her. They simply followed, trusting her judgment and calm presence. Minutes felt like hours as the plane continued its violent descent. Amara moved tirelessly, helping everyone she could reach. She guided families, secured loose items, reassured the frightened, and even coordinated with the flight attendants when possible. Each action, each word, each calm instruction was a step toward survival. The plane's journey had become a battle against fear as much as against mechanical failure, and Amara was at the heart of it. The emergency lights flickered and dimmed, and smoke filled parts of the cabin. Amara stayed low, guiding passengers safely, one by one, to positions where they could survive the landing. She checked exits, assisted with oxygen masks, and reassured everyone she could reach. By now, the entire cabin was aware that she was a source of calm and control. People who had overlooked her earlier now silently thanked her with their eyes and gestures. She did not seek praise. She simply continued to act, focused entirely on keeping everyone alive. With each passing moment, it became clear that the plane's landing would be rough. Yet, thanks to her guidance, most passengers were secured and prepared. Her calm, precise, and decisive actions had created pockets of safety amid the chaos. Those who had been paralyzed by fear now had a path to follow, a steady presence to rely on. The once unnoticed girl in 14C had transformed into the steady heart of the cabin, quietly ensuring that as many lives as possible would be protected. The plane's descent had become more controlled. but the turbulence still rattled the cabin violently. Every passenger was bracing for impact, gripping their seatbelts, holding children tightly, or simply closing their eyes and praying. Amara's hands were steady on the armrests, her eyes scanning the cabin one last time. She moved quickly from row to row, making sure everyone was seated properly, that oxygen masks were secure, and that the few loose items were safely tucked away. Despite the fear pressing in around her, she remained calm, her voice a quiet anchor amidst the chaos. The plane hit the runway with a violent jolt, bouncing slightly before skidding along the tarmac. Screams filled the cabin, but Amara had already positioned herself to help those most vulnerable. She leaned over a frightened child and whispered, "You are safe. Hold my hand if you need to. Breathe slowly with me." The child's small hand gripped hers tightly, and slowly the terrified whimpers turned into quiet, shaky breaths. Around her, other passengers were beginning to react similarly, their focus shifting from panic to following instructions and staying safe. Smoke began to fill part of the cabin from minor sparks caused by friction during the landing. Some passengers were coughing, eyes watering, but Amara guided them calmly. "Stay low, cover your mouth with cloth if you can, and keep moving together. We are almost through this," she instructed. People followed her lead, crouching low and moving as a unit toward the designated exits. Her calm authority reassured them, even as the plane skidded and trembled beneath their feet. The emergency lights flickered, adding an eerie glow to the cabin. Amara noticed a woman near the back struggling with a toddler who had fallen asleep in panic. She moved quickly, lifting the child gently and placing him in his mother's arms. "Hold him close and stay calm," she said softly. "We're almost there." The mother nodded, tears running down her cheeks, and held her child tightly, reassured by Amara's steady presence. In that moment, the passengers realized that this quiet girl had become their guide, their protector, and their voice of calm reason. Outside the windows, the runway was a blur. The plane's nose tilted as it skidded, sparks flying from the undercarriage where friction met the tarmac. Amara continued her work, moving to passengers who had been thrown slightly from their seats, helping them sit upright and secure their belts. She checked on anyone who seemed disoriented or frightened, providing soft words of encouragement. Her presence was like a lifeline, a steady hand in a storm of fear. The plane finally slowed enough to stop, a loud screech of metal and tires echoing through the cabin. A collective gasp of relief swept through the passengers, but Amara knew the danger was not entirely over. Exits could still be blocked, and smoke continued to drift from the rear. She quickly assessed the situation, moving to ensure that everyone could evacuate safely. "Stay calm. We are safe now, but we need to leave the plane carefully," she instructed. Her tone was firm yet reassuring, and people listened. A few passengers hesitated, dazed by the violent landing. Amara knelt beside them, taking their hands and guiding them toward the nearest exits. "Take it one step at a time," she said. "We're almost out. Keep moving slowly but steadily." Her actions prevented panic from spreading further, allowing those who might have frozen in fear to follow her lead. The plane's cabin, once a scene of chaos, now moved with cautious order, thanks to her guidance. Amara turned her attention to the small fire near the back. It was now under control, thanks to the efforts of the flight attendants, but she stayed alert. "Watch the smoke and stay low. Keep moving carefully," she instructed passengers nearby. People followed her example, crouching low and carefully moving toward the exits. Even those who had previously ignored instructions now instinctively followed her lead. Her calm presence had become the center of focus, and everyone trusted her guidance completely. Children clung to their parents, looking to Amara as if she were a guardian angel. She knelt to speak softly to them, guiding them step by step. "Keep holding your parents' hand. Breathe slowly. We're going to be okay." The children, reassured by her steady demeanor, began to follow instructions, allowing parents to lead them safely. Around her, the cabin was transforming from a place of fear into a space of careful, controlled movement. Amara noticed a young man near the aisle who had been struggling with panic. He was trembling and unsure how to proceed. She gently touched his shoulder. "You can do this. Follow me slowly. One step at a time." The man nodded, taking a deep breath, and moved carefully with her guidance. Each person she helped added to the growing sense of calm and order within the cabin. Her quiet heroism was spreading, inspiring passengers to act with courage rather than fear. The flight attendants moved through the aisles, assisting with the evacuation. Amara coordinated quietly with them, pointing out passengers who needed help and ensuring that exits were clear. Her calm, organized presence complemented the efforts of the crew, creating a coordinated effort that maximized safety. Passengers were moving steadily, some holding hands, some assisting children, and others simply following her instructions without hesitation. Outside, emergency vehicles were arriving, their lights flashing. The sounds of sirens and engines filled the air, adding urgency but also reassurance. Amara guided passengers toward the exits, helping them navigate the narrow pathways created by the plane's angle and the emergency response vehicles. She remained focused, ensuring that everyone was accounted for and that no one was left behind. Each step was deliberate, each instruction clear, and each act of guidance life-saving. A woman carrying her small child stumbled near the exit. Amara was there instantly, steadying her and guiding her carefully down the emergency slide. "Hold your child close, keep moving slowly." "You're safe now," she said. The woman's eyes met hers, filled with tears of relief and gratitude. Amara nodded softly, her mind already scanning for the next passenger who might need help. Her own exhaustion was secondary. Her focus was entirely on ensuring the safety of everyone around her. The last rows of the plane were finally beginning to empty. Smoke was dissipating, passengers were following her lead, and the emergency crew was assisting those who needed extra support. Amara moved to a young boy who had been crying uncontrollably throughout the landing. She knelt beside him and held his small hands. "It's over now. You are safe. Take a deep breath with me." Slowly, the boy's sobs subsided, and he looked up at her with wide eyes, finally feeling a sense of safety after a terrifying ordeal. Passengers began to emerge from the plane completely, stepping onto the tarmac with relief and awe. Many glanced back at the girl in 14C who had guided them through the chaos. They whispered words of gratitude, some wiping tears from their eyes, others simply nodding in silent acknowledgement. She did not speak much, only ensuring that everyone continued moving safely toward the emergency vehicles and gathering points. Her quiet heroism had carried them all through the worst moments of the flight. As everyone assembled in the safe zone, emergency personnel checked each passenger. Amara moved among them, making sure families were together, checking for injuries and offering words of calm reassurance. Her presence was still steady, still calm, and still quietly commanding. The passengers, now safe and out of danger, looked at her with respect and gratitude, finally recognizing the girl who had been unnoticed for so long but had become the hero of the flight. News crews arrived shortly afterward, and soon the story spread. Reporters spoke with passengers who recounted how a quiet, unnoticed girl had taken charge, guided them safely, and prevented what could have been a tragedy. Amara remained humble, offering only a few words to reporters while continuing to assist anyone who needed help. She had not acted for recognition, but her actions had left an indelible mark on the hearts of everyone she saved. The passengers she had guided began to reflect on what had happened. Many realized that someone who had seemed ordinary, quiet, and unnoticed could have extraordinary courage and leadership in critical moments. They spoke among themselves about how her calm presence had saved lives, how her quick thinking had prevented injuries, and how her quiet authority had inspired them to follow her guidance without hesitation. For Amara, the experience was transformative. She had always felt unnoticed, invisible in everyday life, but in this moment she had realized the strength and impact one person could have. Even without seeking attention, without loud words or flashy actions, she had made a real difference. Her quiet courage, observation, and calm demeanor had saved lives, proving that heroism could come from the most unexpected places. In the days that followed, Amara received messages of gratitude, recognition, and admiration from passengers and media alike. Yet she remained the same humble, thoughtful girl who had always observed quietly, now with the added understanding that even someone who felt unnoticed could shine in moments that mattered most. Her story became an inspiration to many, a reminder that courage, calm, and careful action could change the course of events, even in the face of fear and uncertainty. And though she had been invisible for most of her life, the passengers and crew she saved would never forget her. The quiet girl in 14C had become a hero, not through fame or attention, but through action, courage, and the unshakable calm that had guided them all to safety. She had shown that even the most unnoticed person could become a beacon of hope in the darkest, most terrifying moments.